Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us for the International Space Station Expedition 63 and 64 Crew News Conference from NASA's Johnson Space Center. With us is NASA astronaut Kate Rubins and cosmonauts Sergey Ryzhikov and Sergey Kud-Sverchkov of the Russian Space Agency Roscosmos to talk about their training and upcoming mission. They will launch aboard a Soyuz spacecraft from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan on October 14th for a 6-month mission aboard the space station. Within weeks after their arrival, we'll celebrate the 20th anniversary of a permanent human presence on the space station. We also anticipate the first operational crewed mission of the SpaceX Dragon spacecraft to take place during their mission, another exciting milestone for human spaceflight. Kate has a background in molecular and cancer biology and led efforts to study viral diseases before being selected as an astronaut in 2009. She spent 115 days in space aboard the space station on Expedition 48 and 49 in 2016, during which she conducted 2 spacewalks and many research investigations, including the first DNA sequencing in space. This will be her second spaceflight. Launching with Kate and the Soyuz commander is Roscosmos cosmonaut Sergey Ryzhikov. Ryzhikov was a flight engineer for Expeditions 49 and 50 in October 2016 through April 2017, when he was on board the space station with Rubins for a few days that October before she returned to Earth. This is also his second trip to space. Finally, we have Roscosmos cosmonaut Sergey Kud-Sverchkov. This will be his first spaceflight. Congratulations, Sergey. We'll give the crew a chance to tell us about their mission, then we'll take questions. For those on the phone, please press star 1 if you have a question, and star 2 to withdraw your question if it's already been answered. If you'd like to ask a question on social media, please use hashtag AskNASA. With that, let me turn to Kate Rubins. Kate, you are a scientist and you participated in hundreds of science investigations during your last mission. What are you most looking forward to for this mission? Can you tell us about some of the science?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really excited about the expansion of some of the early work that we did growing cells for long duration in culture. So I'm a biologist. I tend towards getting really excited about things like growing cells in culture. But the International Space Station offers us a really exciting opportunity to study things like 3-dimensional culture, tissues and organs in microgravity in ways that we can't study on Earth. Because you get these delicate structures that will collapse under gravity conditions. So there's a lot of really exciting biology going on. There's some great physics experiments. You may have seen some scientific press about Cold Atom Lab recently. That promises to be a really exciting investigation for the world of physics. And of course, I'm looking forward to expanding some of the sequencer efforts that we started in 2016 with that team.
That sounds great. We're so excited to see you up there performing all of that important research. With that, let me turn to Sergey Ryzhikov. This will be your second trip to the International Space Station. With that experience, what are you most looking forward to for this space flight?
Хорошего начала и благополучного завершения отработки всех задач поставленных.
I hope that it will start
того,
well,
что вы
finish
доставлю,
well,
возвращу экипаж в здравии и сохранности
and
родным и
that
близким на Землю.
will fulfill all the objectives of the mission, and that the crew will make it safely to Earth and stay well.
All right, thank you. Sergey Kud-Sverchkov, this is your first trip to space. How excited are you for this upcoming launch? What can you tell us about this mission?
Конечно, я рад этому полету, но сейчас все мои мысли сфокусированы на предстоящем отрезке подготовки непосредственно до старта.
Of course, I'm very excited about this upcoming trip to the space station, but right now I'm intensely focused on the last period of training before launch.
All right, great. Let's take some questions. We'll start with questions on the phone and then take questions from social media. So remember, if you're on the phone, please press star 1 if you have a question and star 2 to withdraw your question if it's been answered. If you're on social media, you can ask questions using hashtag AskNASA. All right, starting with the phone, we have Megan Bauer from Pacific Rim Media. Go ahead with your question.
Hi, Kate. In some of my previous research, I've done some DNA analysis. could you talk about how DNA sequencing and analysis in microgravity could support or bolster research being done back on Earth?
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the things that we're really interested in with the DNA sequencing this flight is looking at the microbiome of the space station environment. And that has a lot of parallels with ways that we study the microbiome on Earth. So there's this idea, the microbiome of the built environment. All the microbes all around you, they're not necessarily harmful. In a lot of cases, they're beneficial. But they really surround us, and they're in our environment all the time. What we're very interested in is how the microbiome of the space station might be different. It's been separate from Earth for 20 years. It's its own biome. It's got its own resources and humans coming and going from it. So we want to see what that microbiome looks like, what these small closed environments do when they've been separate for a very long time.
Thanks. Now let's go to Howard Yoon with Napa News.
Kate, this is Howard Yoon from the Napa Valley Register. Good to talk to you again.
Great to talk to you too.
Hello? This is Howard Yoon from the Napa Valley Register.
Yep, and I've got you, Howard.
Yep, okay, all right. I guess my first question for you would be, since I followed your mission in 2016, what would you say is the most important lesson from that experience that you will carry into this mission starting in October?
Yeah, I think it's not so much a lesson, but just the ability to work in space. So when you start out as a rookie, for example, you're not very good at flying and navigating through the space station, so you tend to kind of crawl hand over hand on the handrails. Takes a little while to get your space legs, so to speak. So you have to learn how to transport yourself from one end of the station to the other, how to carry out your activities. The fact that everything floats seems trivial until you try to get a big payload done that has 20 different parts, and you have to figure out where you're going to put all of those. I think learning all those kinds of skills takes a good 2 to 4 weeks, and so I'm really excited to go back again with all that in my toolkit. It means we can start doing a large amount of science right out of the gate. So we'll be taking over from Chris Cassidy, who's also a very experienced astronaut on the U.S. Operating segment, and I think we're going to get hopefully a lot done during our increment. Just that familiarity with space is great.
All right, let's go to Bill Harwood with CBS.
Bill Harwood up at the Kennedy Space Center. This is probably a dumb question, but with your expertise, I'll ask it anyway. By the time you guys take off in October, I don't know if the pandemic is still going to be a pandemic or not. What is your sense of it? Do you think it's still going to be a big deal by the time you fly? And what is your advice to people right now who are facing this, coming from the position of someone who is an expert on immunology and things like that? Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for your question, Bill. So I did used to be a virologist in my previous life. And unfortunately, I do think in October we still will be struggling with this virus. Hopefully, we're going to be able to contain it better. But I think this is going to be around for a while. What we've been doing at NASA is all of the kinds of things that you've been hearing about. So when we can work remotely, we do. When we have to do in-person training, for example, with the crews and some of the flight hardware, we all wear masks, we take social distancing measures, and we sanitize the hardware as we're using it. And I think we're just going to continue that all through training. So the kinds of things that we're advising people to do in their daily lives, this is what the space station crew who's getting ready to launch is doing as well. These are the best things that we know how to do right now to prevent transmission. And I think this is great advice, whether you're training to fly on the space station or you're just going about your daily life to keep you and your family safe.
All right, let's go to Mark Carreau with Aviation Week.
Thank you. It is Mark Carreau with Aviation Week, and my question is for Kate. Looks like a really good chance that you're going to have 7 crew on the space station during your stay and 5 in the U.S. segment. And so I'm wondering what you think that says about the overall value of the space station. And as a scientist astronaut yourself, what does that say about its science mission and science focus?
Yeah, I think it's going to be incredible to have 7 people on the space station. You know, it's really designed to be able to accommodate that many astronauts. We've been doing a lot of things with the space station program in the last few years to get ready for this. So we've been enhancing our abilities to scrub CO2 from the atmosphere, for example. And we're testing a lot of new technologies that we're going to use for exploration. So having 7 crew aboard allows us to test things like new kinds of atmosphere revitalization. We can test things like new spacesuit components. And then certainly with that number of crew on station, we can really increase our science output. And so this is an incredible time for the International Space Station. We've got the commercial crew program going. We have cargo going through our providers. And so we're able to both staff the station and send materials up to really, really increase the throughput of science. This is a mature program. We know how to get a lot of work done up there. And so when we get 7 crew members, we're going to see, I think, a huge scientific output. And I'm really looking forward to seeing that.
All right, let's switch over to a question on social media for all 3 of you. How will you spend the rest of your days before your launch?
Well, from the NASA side, we're almost completely finished with our NASA training. We're going to do some training with our European Space Agency partners in Cologne, and then move to Moscow to finish some training with our Russian partners and our specific Soyuz training. We'll be in masks, and we'll be enjoying our last few months on the planet, but I think we'll be training pretty hard.
For Sergey K.
Sergey K.
Все уже сказала Кейт. Наша подготовка будет продолжаться до дня старта, без остановок, без пауз. Мы отправимся в Кёльн, затем в Звездный городок. И за 3 недели до старта мы отправимся на Байконур, где пройдет финальная часть подготовки и предполетный карантин. И затем уже мы отправимся к Международной космической станции. Подготовка обещает быть очень насыщенной из-за очень сжатых сроков, но мы готовы к этому.
So Kate basically has said it all already. We still have some training to do, and that training will last until the launch date, with no breaks, no pauses. From here, we are going to Cologne and then flying out to Zvozny. And then 3 weeks out before the launch, we'll go to the Baikonur Cosmodrome for the final stage of the preparation and the quarantine. And then we're going to launch to the ISS. So this final leg of preparation of training is going to be very intensive because we have very little time left.
All right, thank you. Another question from social media for each of you, or whoever wants to answer. What comfort protocols are there for crew members who experience homesickness? How do you deal with homesickness in space?
Yeah, from the first mission, I learned that we actually have really great support from NASA. So they provide the ability for us to email our friends and family members. We can call using a voice over internet, phone, and we can even have weekly video chats. So that's great. We get some care packages with letters and things from home. My care package included some plastic scientific equipment so that I could do experiments, because that's what psychologically supports me in space. So we just have a really wonderful team of folks here from the U.S. side that help us, and the Sergeys can answer from the Russian side. They have wonderful support as well.
Конечно, благодаря наземной поддержке работа экипажа на борту обеспечивается в психологическом отношении на все 100%. Мы имеем возможность и связаться с Землей и посредством голосовой связи, посредством видеосвязи. И, как уже было сказано, посредством доставки грузов с использованием грузовых кораблей. Безусловно, это поддерживает экипаж. А также мы можем пытаться их найти и мысленно представить себя рядом с ними, пролетая над родными местами.
We do have excellent ground support that does support the crew 100%, and we can not only communicate with them using audio assets, but there are also video assets as well. And besides, as Kate has said, there are opportunities to send cargo. Yes, the crew are very happy with their ground support, and in addition to what I have mentioned already, we can visualize and try to imagine ourselves back in those places that we can see from up there when we look down on Earth.
That's great. We'll go back to the phone for a few more questions. Let's go to Eva with the California Space Center.
Yes, thank you for making this great meeting available. I have two questions. California Space Center sponsors Lady Rocket Media for the young audience, for the entrepreneurs, and for women, and especially in the area of Lompoc, but also France, Poland, Lithuania, and Ukraine. So I will have a couple of questions for Kate. With your experiments and focus on research and the results that you delivered and plan to deliver, which one would you like to see being transformed into the startup and actually become an enterprise? And the question for both Sergeys is speaking to an audience of the countries that I am sure you know who don't have astronaut programs yet. How would you inspire young women and men in Poland, Lithuania, Ukraine to think about becoming astronauts?
Yeah, so for your first question about commercial enterprises, there's actually a really wide world of commercial space that's opening up. And a lot of the payloads that we're going to be looking at, the scientific experiments, are things like, for example, pharmaceutical companies that are trying to improve something about maybe the binding of their drugs, their therapeutic agents, for example, with a receptor or with a ligand. And so they can study that by crystallizing this and studying the structure in microgravity. We talked a little bit about cells and understanding how cells form, how tissues form. That's got a lot of therapeutic applications. And then there's a whole host of material science kinds of things that startup companies may be really interested in, where microgravity allows us to produce a product in a way that we can't on Earth. And I'll turn it over to my crewmates to answer your second question.
Что касается вдохновления для молодых людей по всему миру и, в частности, в странах, которые вы упомянули, мы можем только сказать, по моему мнению, профессия космонавтов — это самая интересная, самая лучшая профессия на этой планете.
As far as inspiring the youth goes, and the youth over the entire world and the countries you mentioned, I, for one, can only say that the profession of an astronaut or cosmonaut is the best of all. It's the most interesting thing you can do.
That's great. Sergey R., did you have anything to add?
Программа Международной космической станции включает в себя не только страны-участники, партнеры, но и много других организаций и стран, поэтому я думаю, тем молодым людям, которые интересуются как пилотируемой космонавтикой, так и в целом освоением космического пространства, и существует в мире сейчас немало возможностей найти себя и реализоваться успешно.
The International Space Station project includes not only those countries that are part of this project, but there are also other organizations that involve other countries that currently are not part of the ISS. So there are multiple opportunities and lots of ways for those who are interested in piloted space flight and the space exploration in general to involve themselves into this space thing.
Thank you. All right, let's go to Jackie Goddard with The Times London.
Thank you. Hello. My question is for Kate. Could you boil down to layman's terms what studying laser-cooled atoms for quantum sensors means to sort of ordinary mortals, and what applications or benefits that work might bring for life on Earth or for technology breakthroughs for future space exploration? Thank you.
Sure, absolutely. So we have those kinds of experiments like the Cold Atom Lab on Earth. People have been using Bose-Einstein condensates for a long time, and they've been using these atom traps. What microgravity allows us to do is put all of that in free fall, essentially. And so that really helps the instrument stay colder. That allows us to look at the experiment over a longer period of time. We can see phenomenon that we weren't able to see before. And really, the first Cold Atom Lab results have demonstrated that we were able to install it on station, and we can get these first results. And so this is really the opening of this facility. There's eventual applications for a lot of different things with atom interferometry. So we can. It's a little hard to explain exactly what we're going to get out of this in terms of things that you're going to use every day. But certainly we know that very high precision timing atomic clocks are important. Things like navigation. You can imagine the types of opportunities that that's going to open up, similar to things like GPS and small processors have opened a world of devices to us.
All right, let's go to Robert Perlman with Collect Space.
Hi, Robert Perlman with Collect Space. So the question for Kate, given that we are coming, that soon after you arrive on space station, you will arrive at that 20-year milestone of continuous human occupancy. I was wondering what your own memories are of Expedition 1, if you have any specific memories of the mission you can share, and what does reaching this milestone as an international group of agencies mean to you? What does it say about our advance in spaceflight? Thanks.
I think it's just incredible that we've had a space station with continuous human presence for 20 years. It's truly amazing, and you really feel it when you arrive at the space station and see this hardware and see these modules put together and flying in space. It's one of the most incredible engineering achievements I think that humanity has done, and the fact that we've done it as an international partnership and a collaboration, I think that's absolutely the intangible benefit of all of this. So Expedition 1, I was not an astronaut at that point. I was a scientist, and I was a virologist, and I was a space fan. So I followed that along with the rest of you space fans, and had some big dreams, but never thought that I would actually be getting a chance to fly to this incredible engineering marvel.
All right, let's go to Russell Pounds with Pacific Rim Media.
Hello, this is Russell Pounds with Pacific Rim Media, and a question for Kate. So I'm looking at what's going on with our pandemic across the world right now, and I was curious, what's your greatest hope for a silver lining that may come from the current crisis we're working through?
Yeah, I think things are really tough right now, and it's this is a tough time, and it's really a tough time for the whole world. What we are seeing from the field of science is really an incredible amount of effort. I have never, as a scientist, seen so many scientists working towards one goal. And so you can see that with the people that are developing diagnostics for the virus, developing vaccines and therapeutics. literally the world's scientific enterprise is focused on solving this problem. I think scientists are finding new ways to collaborate together, and they're speeding up research. The pace of the discoveries is pretty incredible. So I am heartened by what we can achieve together as humanity, and the scientific progress that we're seeing, I think, is going to bear fruit in terms of our ability to handle this disease and really ensure that we emerge from it.
All right, let's go back to a couple of questions on social media. For Sergey R., what are the training differences between the Soyuz TMA-M and the Soyuz MS, if you can answer and have an experience on that?
В процессе моей подготовки в течение 14 лет мы уже изучаем 4-ю модификацию Союза. Конечно, имеется серьезное отличие, несмотря на то, что внешне Союз сохраняет свою конфигурацию. Нам с Кейт посчастливилось принимать участие в испытаниях первых 2 кораблей. В настоящее время уже происходит серийная эксплуатация этого изделия, хотя каждое изделие отличается от предыдущего какими-то дополнениями, какими-то изменениями. Более детально мы уже будем отрабатывать это все на тренировках в Звездном городке.
Yes, indeed. It took me 14 years studying different Soyuz modifications, and now we have modification number 4. There are extremely important differences, very significant ones, even though the Soyuz vehicle looks the same. And Kate and I have already had the opportunity to test out the first 2 vehicles of this new series, and now it's a series that goes continuously, even though each vehicle is still different from the previous one. And to provide more details, we'll have to do some tests and to continue to work with this particular vehicle when we get on board.
All right. Please remember, if you have a question on the phone bridge, to press *1, and I will call on you. For now, let's take another one from social media. This is for Kate on YouTube. What is DNA sequencing, and why is it different on the International Space Station?
Yeah, that's a great question. So DNA, this is the building blocks of life. This is the blueprint that's in your cells and in every cell of every living organism on Earth. And sequencing is essentially reading that. So it's like reading a book. It's comprised of 4 letters only, so it's a strange book, but we read each letter individually with a DNA sequencer. And that can tell us a lot of different things. It can tell us, for example, if we're looking at microbes, which different species are there. So we read their genome, we match them to a database, and we can tell who's who and where they're living. We can also tell things like how the environment is affecting cellular changes. So in that case, we're reading out the messages from the DNA. This is called RNA. And we can also tell things like epigenetics, so how that DNA may be modified in a different environment. There was a study recently about the 2 twins, one on Earth and one on the ground and one in space, and they looked at epigenetic modifications, which are the changes to the DNA, possibly due to spaceflight. So the actual process of sequencing is not different in space, but what we're using this as a tool to examine how things change in space. So for example, if you want to see how the microbial environment is different in space, you count the microorganisms up there. If you want to see how cells change in response to microgravity and different gravitational sensing, you can look at the messages that are coming out of those cells. So it's really a tool to look at all of these different kinds of things that are happening at the cellular and the molecular level in space.
All right, that's amazing. Thank you. Another question on Twitter. This is for Kate and Sergey R. What was your best or favorite memory from your last mission? Let's start with Kate.
Sure. I think probably my favorite memory was on the spacewalk. There's really nothing that compares to being at vacuum. We were at the very front of the space station, so the port that Bob and Doug just docked to with their Endeavour spacecraft was one of the things that we were installing. So we got to turn around and look and see the entire space station from the outside. You don't realize what it's like when you're living inside it, and so to be outside it and looking back, that was pretty incredible. I got a chance to snap a photo of Jeff Williams, who was out there with me on the spacewalk with the whole station behind him, and that crystallizes the best memory I have.
Amazing. Sergey R.?
Для меня необычайные воспоминания оставили сама, конечно, длительное пребывание на борту станции, возможность постоянного нахождения в невесомости. Это то чувство, которое можно сравнить с какими-то невыразимыми детскими мечтами, которые наконец-то осуществились. И, безусловно, возможность наблюдения нашей родной прекрасной планеты.
So for me, the most vivid impressions were left by the mere fact of my long-duration stay on board the ISS, experiencing zero-G weightlessness, which I can compare to like dreaming when you're a kid, and of course observing the Earth from afar from up there.
All right, great. Another question on Twitter. This one's for Kate. What goals do you wish to accomplish in your biological studies towards cancer research?
Yeah, so I got my PhD in cancer biology, but I actually did a lot of work on virology. Most of our work on space station is focused by things which microgravity affects. So I think we are going to study a lot of cellular mechanisms, the response of cells to microgravity, how cells organize. For example, we can look at small organoids and how they might form structures in microgravity. These things aren't directly related to understanding cancer or the process of mutation, but we can understand a lot more about human physiology. And gravity is one of those variables that we can't ever check on the ground. We can't assess our experiment with and without gravity. That's very difficult to do here for a number of reasons. We have some setups that don't quite, they're close approximations, but they don't quite mimic true microgravity. So I'm really interested in understanding cell and tissue architecture. And when we understand that better, we often get an idea about things like tumor biology and tumor environment and how tumors may move around in the body.
All right. We'll go back to the phone one more time. Russell Pounds, did you have a follow-up question?
Yes, thank you very much. The follow-up is Kate. For Kate, in your experience, what is the aha moment for everyday Americans or even the business community that our large investments in space exploration is valuable?
Yeah, I think you really see that when we increase the scientific output on the space station, and really when we reached 6 crew members, we started seeing the numbers of papers come out. And these are things that are influencing a whole range of potential either products for people or our understanding of fundamental things. We talked a lot about cells and biology, but there's things about manufacturing that we can understand in microgravity, material science. There's ways to process things differently and analyze them differently. We can study things like combustion. There's, I think, pretty much any area. There's something very interesting to study with microgravity, and it may have a direct commercial application, or it may be something that leads us along the road to a commercial product. But I think it's hard to find an area that doesn't have some kind of influence from the effect of gravity, and really the only way to study that is in this incredible orbiting laboratory.
All right, let's go to Howard Yoon for a follow-up.
Kate, I wanted to ask you this. During your first mission, you led a 20-minute video conference from the space station back to Vintage High School here in Napa. Now, obviously, the schools here have been closed for 3.5 months, and there's considerable debate as to when I should say, it'll be safe to reopen live classes again. But I would like to know what plans NASA is making to possibly have you reach out to students again, even if it has to be done by alternative means.
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's one of the great things about space station educational opportunities is we do them remotely by video. And so we're working on a number of different opportunities to be able to have students tie in remotely and ask questions and be able to have astronauts answer those questions. So, you know, versus having everybody sit in an auditorium, we still can do this and tie this into the remote learning that a lot of districts are doing. The other thing that NASA's done a wonderful job, and this was not just during the pandemic, but they put a whole host of educational activities online. So if you just go to www.nasa.gov, you can look at the section there under for educators, and you can find all kinds of experiments that students can do at home, complete kits of things that are appropriate for different grade levels. So there's a lot of information online, either for students or for parents or for educators. When people are remote learning, if they want to get involved in NASA or get their students involved in science, I think it's a wonderful resource. I'd really recommend checking that out.
That's great. All right, we'll take one final question. This one is from social media. We have several people asking about the communication between the crew. Kate, do you speak Russian, and how do you guys communicate?
Да, конечно. Мы говорим по-русски. We speak in Russian. When we're in the U.S., we tend to all speak in English when we're doing our training here. When we're over in Russian, it's easier to do everything in Russian. When we're in the Soyuz, our procedures are in Russian. So I think we switch back and forth pretty often with the crew members. Confuses our instructors occasionally, but we don't usually have a problem communicating.
All right. Sergey, Kay, did you have anything to add to that?
Мне нечего добавить. У нас прекрасное понимание между всеми членами экипажа. Кейт хорошо говорит и понимает нас с Сергеем, и мы с Сергеем прекрасно общаемся с Кейт. И в этом плане у нас все отлично. Можно только порадоваться.
Nothing really to add. The mutual understanding within our crew is fantastic. Kate speaks Russian really well, and she understands really well, so there aren't really issues with the language at all.
That's wonderful. Okay, with that, we'll wrap up today's news conference. Thank you so much to Kate, Sergey for answering questions today and being with us, and best wishes to you and your launch and your mission. We're so excited to see you guys up on the International Space Station. Everyone should watch Kate, Sergey, and Sergey launch on October 14th. You can watch on NASA TV, online at nasa.gov/live, or on Facebook Live on the NASA Facebook page. You can also follow the International Space Station on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook for updates, and visit nasa.gov/station for more information. Thanks for joining us. Thank you.